Hey, it's the Forest Daughter Creel, and I thought I would film today how I make beaded cards or tags for my journal. I have picked out a whole bowl of beads that I thought would work well with these, including a beading needle. I have got DMC floss and some braided polyester beading thread and colors to work with this beautiful woman. This woman is by Fable Journal on Etsy. I've already done the first layer of backing on the back with some pretty paper, an Endpaper Kit. And then this pretty fairy misty woman is by Leanna Scrap. And I have also picked out some colors I thought would work well with her beads and some scraps of paper in the same color theme. The background paper I have chosen to add to the woman I'm going to call the Countess is some coffee dyed paper I made, and I had sprinkled some instant coffee on at the end as it was almost dry. It formed some shiny lumps, but I think they're going to be really pretty when added to the background of this. So this is what I'm working with. Also paper here. I think it's by Fable Journal as well as a medieval prayer, and it's done in kind of a manuscript style, so I'll be using bits of that to decorate. All right, I'm gonna sit down and get started. I'm not gonna be able to move the lamp very well. I don't have a fancy setup. My kitchen is 80 degrees in here and the fan is running, so I apologize if I fade in and out at times. I'm gonna start with this one here. Make sure I got you. You can see what I'm doing. I thought I would add a strip of this, so I'm just gonna go in and tear some. Make sure all the edges are torn. And I'm gonna add a piece of this here. I really want the black, so I'm gonna tear that and then tear here. Make sure the letters are right side up. I use Elmer's glue all for about everything. It's thicker than school glue, so it dries faster with less warping. I like the tactile feeling of smearing glue around with my fingers. I guess I'm strange. A lot of the stuff does have to be stacked under books to dry overnight to get it flat. That's all right. It's fairly inexpensive and easy to use. And I keep a damp cloth with me at all times and just wipe as I go. Easy to get off my fingers, easy to work with. Okay, and then this needs some balancing up here. Again, just smear it. Get it almost dry, put it down, wipe up any mess, and continue. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to add on the front right now. So I'm going to end up tearing some of this pretty paper to give a writing surface on the back. I was going to go for some of what's in here. So let's get to it. Okay, I've gotten it a little short, so I'm going to need to add a little bit of visual something. But first I'm going to glue this on. Don't like that. need need something a little warmer. Got a notebook full of scraps and pieces here. Like this. So not to show the white ruffled edges, when you tear the part you don't want down and away, and it'll make less white edges. Yeah, I'm working on my kitchen table, and it is 80 degrees in the kitchen. And my kitchen table may be a fun place for the kittens to play. Got 2 new ones, so they may jump up here as well. Tried to wait till they were asleep for their afternoon nap. Got to slide stuff around and try. It eventually all comes together. And I think that's all I want to put on the back of this one. So, we've got the coffee dyed paper, a couple of scrapbook papers, and the beautiful medieval manuscript paper from Fable Journal. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. This one has had the first layer added to the back. Some of the scrap papers I picked to play with on this one. I liked the way this had a little bit of fern and very similar colors, so I really want to get that edge. And I don't want cut edge, so I'm gonna tear on all sides. Yeah, I like it there. And again, a bead of glue around the edge, a couple swirls in the middle. Just wipe it so that it feels wet evenly across the whole surface. Wipe it. I have a bone smoother, but sometimes just getting it a little damp with the cloth on the outside, as well as where you've put the glue, can help it dry more evenly. I love this little tiny scrap of something I had left. It's, you don't know, it looks kind of magical. I look like I'm losing the light here, so I don't know if I need to add more light. Ugh, let's don't. And I'm gonna keep the straight edges for contrast on this one. I'm not sure this adds anything, honestly, so I may not use that. You're not obligated to use everything that you've pulled out of your pile. I do like this color. I'm gonna see how it tears. If it's got white edges, no, it goes all the way through, so that's nice. I like working with strips. They're easy to tear. So I'm gonna tear off this end. Again, if I go in and out of the shot, I'm still new to making videos. Please forgive me. Hope I'm not making you too seasick. Trim the edges on this. And I think that's all I'm going to put on this one. I usually string the beads from the upper right hand corner, doesn't make any difference. And since I'm going to string a lot of thread, I want something behind here to make this just a little thicker. So I can go with another piece of this, I think. There we go. And then I'm just using a small hole punch on these today, just a Fiskars. It is a really tiny hole there. If it's not big enough, I can punch it again with a larger punch, so it's not a big deal. I'm going to go in quite a ways to make sure that it has room not to tear through. And then I like to round the corner. It just makes it easier for the decorated strings to slide a little bit. Just freehand it. Okay, and then back to this one. Pretty sure that's thick enough, but just in case, I can add another spot of this pretty red. Getting stuff piled up. I usually put stuff away as I go, but I don't want to stop and do that while we're filming. It's a little hectic here. But what is a hectic mess among friends, right? Really, you don't have to have very much fancy equipment at all here. You see me use scissors, glue, and a damp rag. Pretty easy. So let me punch the hole on this and round the corner. Now if you can see the hole there. And then just guesstimate around corner. Really, it's a junk journal. It does not have to be perfect to be beautiful. So the beads that I especially thought would be pretty on this one are some painted wood, not wood, I'm sorry, these are bone. These are water buffalo bone. They're ethically harvested, so nothing in the wild was killed. They're just domestic water buffalo whose time had come. And they've been painted and lacquered. And I wanted to go something with a little bit of gold because she feels like royalty to me. Now, working with DMC floss, I like to use the full 6 strands just because I like the texture. But if you're using beads with smaller holes, you might have to go with fewer strands or a different stringing material altogether. So, gold beads, bone beads, and there were a couple little metal beads, if I can find them in this. You guys probably could spot them sooner than I can. Here's one. There's the other. Okay. And those are what I was going to work with for these. And I may add a couple of these, I'm not sure. So I'm going to start with the finest beads, finest whole beads, which are these metal beads here. And I'm going to string it through double, so I'm going to give myself plenty of thread to work with. I don't like the beads to move up and down the thread, so I usually tie a knot above where my beads will be, and then knots beneath where they'll be to hold them on the string. I've gotten to the point in my life where it's sometimes easier for me to see small work with my glasses off, but let's see here. And of course they never stack, just keep going till you get one knot at the top, big enough that your beads won't slide back and forth. There we go. I may not need a beading needle on this thread. Let's see. Nope. Then again, tie a couple of knots to keep it from sliding off the bottom. Might have needed to give myself more thread. This is wonderfully strong polyester stuff, but it means it's slick and the knots sometimes come out. So I dot these with glue at the end. And just make sure it doesn't move, and that's good. And then as much floss as I want, probably to there. I want it to hang a little more than halfway down. So I'll start the next knot here. Remember, if what you try doesn't work, you have scissors, you can cut it all out and start again. And you may not see that on these videos, but believe me, they do. Cut stuff out and start again. It's not a big deal. If it's not fun, don't do it. See, I've got glue all over my finger. One knots at the bottom here. I found that for me, an old broken chopstick works great in pulling the knot up to the bead. So I keep one handy. A skewer, a large needle would both work as well. So I had an awl, but I was too mean to it. It didn't survive. Okay, so now I'm going to trim the ends even, fairly even. And that is our first strand that will go on this. And I'm going to dab glue. Again, it's just the Elmer's glue all. It dries clear. I'm going to get it off the bead and work it into the knot a little bit. There we go. Set that one aside. And then I pick this. Oh, see, I've already made a mistake. I put the metal ones on the green for the Forest Lady, but that's all right. This is the color, this deep burgundy that I picked out for our Countess. Figure out how much space I'll need for these beads and then repeat the process. If you can tie a knot. No, the beads have scattered. These are neat. These are a check glass. They've got purple and a little bit of blue and a little bit of amber color in them. And I think I want more than one of these on this. So I tied a knot in between them. You don't have to. Just depends on how you want them to hang. So we've got 2 on that one. Again, figure out where I want it to hang from the card. Tie the knots for the next set. You can hear our little ice maker dropping ice. My daughter loves the soft ice that has the hollow tube through the center. So we actually have a little tiny portable ice maker set up in the kitchen just for her. There's a single knot between the beads, and I'm going to do a double thick knot here so they don't slide off the end. See how those separated? No big deal, just sling it around again till they all form one big knot. Really isn't a big deal. Trust me, nobody will notice one way or the other. Okay, and then just as before, I'm going to dab a little glue, maybe. And trim the ends about even. Yeah, she said. There we go. Let that dry. For this lovely lady, I also wanted to make sure that I used some black. So I bought at a thrift store some embroidery floss, mostly small bits and pieces, which have served me very well. This looks like 2 sets. Somebody pre-cut their strands for embroidery or cross stitch. Just need one. And here is where I'll use the beading needle. But first I'm going to tie the knots, the double knot, to keep the beads from sliding up and down the strand. You don't have to do this. I just like my beads to stay where I put them. And if you've not used a beading needle, they basically look like 2 pieces of wire that are fused at the top and the bottom, and one super huge eye. So you can put your strand through, snug it down. Beading needles are awesome if you've never worked with them. They're kind of strange and they're pointing at both ends, so you have to be careful not to poke yourself. I'm going to use some of these inexpensive gold colored glass beads. I don't think I need more than that, so let's see what we got here. These are kind of interesting because they're not all exactly the same shape like you'd find with Tohos or Makiyus. I'm just adding them till I get a length of bead stretch that I like. I think that's going to be good. Then to pull this out, you scoot it back to the biggest part of the needle, and then we tie our double knot again. I suck at this part, get my knots to stack, but like I've said, just keep going till they do. Nobody but you will ever be the wiser. Just adds character. Now DMC floss holds its knots fairly well. You shouldn't have to go back over these with glue. They'll be fine. And there's one end. Again, give me a rough estimate of how far down I want these to hang, and tie another knot. Attach the beading needle. If you don't have a beading needle, you're going to have to find like a tapestry needle or something that has a pretty large eye if you're working with all 6 strands. But then because of that, you're also going to have to find beads that are like 6/0 at least to give you an opening to thread the tapestry needle through. So because these beads are irregular in shape, usually if they were regular, I would count, say, oh, I'm going to do 10 beads on each side. But because these gold ones come in such a different variety of lengths, I'm going to thread them till I think they look about the same. So I would be putting them side by side here. And it looks like I need at least 3 more, so let's see what we got here. again. Looks too long. I'm going to take one off. Helps if I take the beading needle off first. There we go. And here I go trying to stack my knots again. The hardest part of this whole process for me is stacking the knots. The number of knots you stack is going to depend on how big the opening in your beads is, because you don't want them to slide off. Okay, those stacked, but I'm going to add one more loop. There we go. Cut the ends about the same. And set that one aside. Kind of hesitant on using something this white, but it is here. You do see it in the work. So let's just see what happens if we do. Like I said, you don't have to string them all. It'll certainly go on another tag in a future date. It's nothing to worry about. Oh, let's start with tying the knot. I get talking and I forget my order of operations. Beading needle, you slide a thumbnail in there if you can, and then you can pull it open. Okay, I thought on this one, I don't know, we can do the wooden beads because they have a white dot, or I can do this more cream colored bead. I'll do the wooden beads. Now, as you can see, the hole is so big, this bead slid right over it. So, got to make the knot bigger. Or, alternatively, you could thread a smaller bead above and below it. Probably don't need the needle for this. And it's still pulling over, so I'm going to thread a smaller bead above and below it. I don't really want to stack the knots 10 times. That seems a little outrageous. So I will use 2 of similar size of those gold beads. One on the top, the bone bead, one on the bottom, and because their hole is a little smaller, I don't have to tie as many knots in a row. And because I've used the gold beads on another strand, they'll work right in. It'll look intentional. Nothing like getting to play with glue and beads, huh? That looks good. Guesstimate how far down I want it on this again. Tie some knots. I'm just digging around in a bowl of beads that I picked out ahead of time because I thought the colors and themes were pretty with these cards. Don't have to use them all. Sucks to have to put them away, but it is so much easier when you've already narrowed your playing field before you start beading. The reason I have so many beads is that I used to make jewelry. But it's always good. Etsy has great shops for selling the beads. Pick out 2 or 3 Toho beads that you like in 8/0 and 6/0. Those are just the sizes. Actually, the smaller the number, the bigger the hole. So a 6/0 is actually a bigger bead than an 8/0, but both work well in journals. You don't want beads that are so big that when they're in your pockets in your journal and you try to close the journal, they end up making your journal hang open funny or indenting parts of the pages. 6/0 and 8/0 are pretty good. This is probably the biggest I'd go is this bone bead here, but if they are a flat bead, of course, that's not an issue. And if you don't have beads, you can pick out pretty papers, cut little squares and glue them back to back on the ends. They'll flutter and they're pretty. And you can pick papers that contrast or tie them with a color scheme that you're working for on your journal. And that works really well. Some people use postage stamps on the ends of their signature ties. I really like beads on the writing cards. It just adds another whole sense of tactile play. You can see how awkward I am at beading, making knots, and yet I'm still getting it done. I'm so glad you're here with me today. All right, what are the chances of me getting these to stack up, these knots? I don't think so, so I'm gonna open it up a little, pull the knot in. There we go. So that's what that strand looks like. And trim it down a little bit. So far for this one, we have this strand and then this one on a different kind of thread. And then the last beads I hope to get on this were some of these ivory colored beads. And for that, I'm going to use this color floss, which picked up the color on both the owl and her hair. Start with stacking a knot. And the beading needle. And I don't want this to be the exact same height as the other strands. So since the first strand I strung is actually going to end up being used, I got this mixed up. Let's see. This one is also part of this. So here we go. We're going to use the ivory, she says, picking up the gold. I like the height of the beads, or the length of the section, to at least, I know this is going to sound weird, be a fingerful so that you can play with it when you're picking it up. It's about like that. You can get a bag of different wooden beads, a mix, at most Joann's very reasonably, and that's a neat place to start too. And about how far down the page. Tie the knot. Now if I were using a bead that's more regular in shape, I would count how many beads I put on and just repeat the number on the second side of the string. But because I'm using beads that are really irregular, I have to lay them side by side till the lines are the same length. And that's close enough. So this is, usually I do 2 or 3, and it looks like I've got 4 here, so I may not use them all. And I know it's overkill in a fun way, don't you think? So I've kind of lined them up. You make just a point, fold it in half. This is almost as much fun here as tying the knots. Try to get the loops lined up. Trying to figure out, there it is, now they're even. And then you have a hole, you pull the whole mess of beads through that hole. This is why I round the edges. It makes it slide back and forth smoothly without getting snagged on a corner. Yep, that may be overkill, but at least you got to see how the process goes to putting these together. So the writing surface and the beads on this one. And then we'll finish this one up. So far we have just the delicate gold on a green thread. Planned on using this cream one. So on the card we just made, I may go back and rethread it and just pick 1 or 2, or I may keep it obscenely fun and jiggly with all those beads. It depends on the journal it eventually ends up in. Okay, for this one, I have some check glass beads that are gold with a little bit of shimmer on the back. And some of them read almost a pale blue or lavender, which will be pretty. I actually want the shiny side to be down, so that, or up in this case, right? Since it's going to the top of the bead, I want the shiny side Yeah. Me. That's not gonna work. It needs to go up. Okay, so when it's on the strand, you'll see what I mean here. The shiny side will be outside of the stack of beads. Middle one doesn't matter. And the bottom one, we want the opposite, so the shiny side will be facing the knot. And that did not work. The knot is too far down. That's okay. It got snugged up anyway. There you go. So shiny side up, up. There we go. And shiny side down. And we're just going to try what it looks like with only these two strands. A little less bodacious effect. So we get these about leveled up. Fold to a point. I go from the front back. It doesn't really matter. They're going to be pretty no matter how you do it. Okay. Ah, look at that one. It's got a little bit of bounce to it. Okay, so I think that's plenty on this one. And then the back for writing on this. This excited bounce here will less and less. It just came off the spool, so it's got a little more bend in it. I'm not sure about that, but that's how the process is to make beaded tassels for your tags. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Forest Daughter.